Good evening, good evening, good evening. Today's Thursday, April 16th. We just passed tax day. How you doing out there? I'm fine. Well, it's time for Let's Talk Power Live, where we take the idea of power in education and talk about it in very concrete ways. I'm Dr. Tangi Marshall, excited to have you join me for another episode. I don't know if I call them episode chats, but anyway, I'm glad to have you here with me this evening. First things first, are you a subscriber? We've been looking at information about our show, and we're so excited to have people join us. If you are one of the 90% of people who are coming to watch us, but you haven't subscribed yet, I'm going to ask you to do something. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the share button, leave us a comment. And then for the rest of you who are our subscribers, thank you so much for spending time with us, for trusting us, for joining us on this power journey. I want to share something with you. Let's Talk Power Live is going to turn 2 this year, and we are aiming to have 200 subscribers by May 15th. That is our anniversary. We're asking all of you to share the link to our show with 2 people to help us get to 200 subscribers for our 2nd birthday. That's what we got. Well, what are you thankful for? I'm thankful that I'm here working with schools. I am thankful for the opportunity to spend some time with you. And we're going to really keep digging into this conversation about assessments. And we're going to be thinking about the conversation related to what does it look like post assessments? Because a lot happens after the assessments. But what I've learned from my travels, being in the classroom and out of the classroom, if you are not designing that space with intentionality, you're going to end up with something you don't always want. I'm having technical difficulties. Give me a second. There we go. We're all back. So that's what we're really going to talk about tonight and really think through what does it mean to have a well-designed, I am having technical difficulties. Hold on one second, everybody. There we go. I think I'm back now. Yes, I'm back. You know what I always say when I'm doing sessions with people and something happens with the technology, I'll say, I love technology until I don't. Well, I love technology until I didn't this evening. We got some glitchy things happening. Might be because of my hotel room. But anywho, there we are. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And I want to go ahead and get started. People ask me all the time, what is power in education? Why do we talk about power in education? I talk about power in education because power in education is a real thing. I share the definition with you every week, and I'm going to share it with you now because that's what we do. So, what is power, right? Education is the instrument of democratic designs, and it is no less the instrument of power, the control of information, the shaping of understanding, and the influence of judgment are critical elements common to democratic design, power theory, and educational philosophy. That is what it is in the nutshell, the big idea of power in education. We can look around our landscape right now and realize that the idea of power is very real. From the more than 3,000 books that have been taken off shelves, we are facing the largest removal of books since the McCarthy era. Let that sink in. This is 2026, and we've had more books removed from shelves than were removed during the McCarthy era. If that's not an issue of power in education, that democratic design, then I'm not quite sure what is. So, if power in education is what I just described to you, let's talk about instructional power. And here it is. It can be understood as an educator's use of their state, district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. That's what it is. When you make decisions as a leader of a district, of a building, or of a classroom that impacts whether or not a child has access to education or whether they have a constraint to education, you're exercising your instructional power. That's what we're talking about. So tonight, We were going to have a guest, and I don't know if she's going to be able to get here tonight. She might be she might be indisposed, or might be doing something that's precluding her from getting here. We're going to have Dr. Donna Ford join us this evening, but I'm not sure if she's going to be able to make it. She's probably at the AERA doing magnificent things, because that's who she is and what she does, and we'll be able to get her back. But our conversation tonight was really around the mistakes that leaders make when we're getting ready for assessment. Now, here's the thing. Assessment season is real. You cannot get around it. It's happening all year. And as states and districts lean into this assessment season and go deeply into it, and some levels, you don't have just your state assessment. You have the state assessment for English and math. Then you might have a science assessment in a certain grade. You might have social studies or civics in another grade. You might have third-party assessments. So there's a lot of assessments happening this year. What I have found, and what most of us know who are already part of this process, is this. Assessments are not neutral. If you've been following me the last few weeks, you've heard me say this. They're not neutral. But here's the other thing about assessments. Assessments reveal more than just outcomes. Assessments reveal something about your learning environment. You're going to definitely get a readout of what students produced on that test on that day. But you're going to also get a readout on what students were experiencing throughout the year. And we were going to talk about access, and I want to share some very important data with everybody tonight. So let's take a look at some important information around access. Assessments also reflect access. When students experience what they experience before the testing shapes how they show up. Access to rigor is uneven long before your assessments even begin to show up. And then end of year data reflects your system under pressure. That's something to really consider. Your systems are going to reveal something about the consistency and the foundation of your learning environment. Are educators really doing the kind of work that you wanted them to do? You're going to also learn something about how access to rigorous opportunities have also been available, because a lot of times our students are undertaught. It's not just that they are not getting to the standard. What's happening is they are also being undertaught standards. And by the time they get to the end of the year, if they've been undertaught and undertaught and undertaught, the gap between what they've been taught and how they're going to be assessed has been widening. Not because students don't know how to do things, it's because they have not been taught how to do what they're being assessed on. Last week, Josh Parker and I talked about this idea of assessment being closest to the curriculum. And then sometimes if that assessment closest to the curriculum is misaligned to your state assessment, you're creating variance between how they're instructed and how they're assessed. But this idea of access is something very important to consider. And I want to share some very important access data with you. So I want you to think about access to advanced learning and how uneven it is. African American students make up 15% of the high school population, but they're only about 9.5% of the advanced placement coursework opportunity for access. So right there, you see 15% and you see 9.5%. That is a gap in opportunity and access to advanced learning. Nearly 15% of students attend schools with no AP courses at all. For African American students, they have no courses in no AP courses in their schools at all. And 75% versus 93% Black and Asian students access to schools with 5 or more AP classes. So Right then, you're seeing this gap at the high school level that's going to be perpetuating a narrative around students who don't measure up or students who can't. And there are a lot of factors that play into whether or not a child has access. The primary tool of access to advanced coursework is through teacher recommendation. So, if you are a teacher and your underlying beliefs are such that you don't think a certain student has the ability to do advanced coursework, you're not going to recommend them. And what does that mean for opportunities for students for whom our pervasive or pervading narrative about ability is one of a deficit lens? That's something to really consider as we think critically about access. But I also want to talk about something else as we think through what does it mean for us to have access to advanced coursework that then opens the door for young people to really be able to tell you and show you their best work by the end of the year. And I want to share something else. This power dynamic, and you hear me talk about power, right? Power is a real thing. The power dynamic here is real. Black students remain underrepresented in gifted and advanced learning. The Education Trust has done a lot of work on access and opportunities for students to have advanced coursework. That's a really important idea to consider. Who has the access? And why is there such a disparity between access to advanced coursework for some students versus other students? Underrepresentation is a system problem, not a reflection of the potential. If we're talking about large groups of students being in schools where they have no access to advanced placement, and advanced placement coursework is a gateway to more college access, whether you believe in four-year colleges or not, it is still a gateway access tool for students to potentially do a couple of things. Number one, go to college, a traditional four-year college. And then the second thing is when they get there, have less courses to take, because if they pass their AP classes, then they would be able to get to college and get through their college majors faster, thereby reducing the amount of debt or payments that they would have to make. So this access issue is a system issue, but we keep trying to make it a kid issue. And here's a question I tend to ask leaders when they look at their data and they see large numbers of students not performing or underperforming. I ask them a question, and I say this: you either have a kid problem or you have something else. And a lot of times they say, we have something else. Well, if we have something else with this idea of access to access to advanced coursework as a system issue, the question becomes, what do we do? And the question here is, when the rigor narrows, the power shifts. And these are adults who are constraining access to the kinds of coursework that would really open more avenues for students, not less avenues for students. So the question becomes, what does it mean to have access to advanced coursework? And when does that start? I remember when we moved from New Jersey to North Carolina, we didn't really have advanced coursework in our middle schools in New Jersey, but in North Carolina, that was a big thing. And I remember teaching honors English for my 8th grade students for a number of years. And the students who were in the honors class for English were the students who were taking algebra in the 8th grade. So if you take algebra in the 8th grade, you've opened up a doorway When your child gets to high school, where where they're on a track that will allow them to take more advanced coursework. Algebra is a gateway course. And if your child as an adult, as a parent, isn't accessing that as early as possible, that's going to be a constrainer. But on the school level, the question becomes, how are students being made ready? What are the defining characteristics that you want students to possess in order to demonstrate that readiness? And then what are the structures in place that are actually making it possible for as many students that you can to get access to your advanced coursework, be it at the middle school level or at the high school level? And that's something to really consider. How do we make that an idea, right? And so this really is not about the test, because the test is the test. And a lot of times you have no control as a building leader or a classroom leader. You don't really have control over the test. And so when you do the test, it's going to reveal something about what's happening at the foundation of your school. It's going to tell you what your priorities are. It's going to tell you how you interpret and where your sort of interpretation lines go, if there's some underlying deficit thinking there. But it's also going to talk about who we trust to think. Because a lot of times our students who are getting the most access to advanced coursework are those students that we believe, one, deserve it, and two, are capable. And a lot of times we are not really ready to admit the fact that we have deficit thinking, we have variety thinking about our students, and we believe that certain students really are deserving of it and others are not. And until we are really ready to lean into our core beliefs, not the ones we say, but the ones we actually have, we're going to continue to see our results be what they are. Now, this is not about students who are coming from households that have extreme conditions. We're not talking about that, because what we're seeing by way of data would suggest that every student has extreme home conditions, and that simply is not the case. And so our job as education leaders from district, building, and classroom really is about how are we naming and deeply leaning into our core beliefs about who deserves to think, right? And then who we going to reduce the outcomes for, right? Who do we reduce outcomes for? And here's the other question: who do we see as just an outcome? Who do we see as just an outcome? Because every one of those I just listed is a leadership decision. When we think about who gets to think, I want you as a leader right now, right, about the last observation you went into, particularly my middle schoolers. Who in those classrooms got the opportunity for thinking time? Who in those classrooms got the opportunity to really, really talk to one another and really have a conversation about the materials? That's something to consider. And as we continue to think about what your life is going to look like after assessments, that's something we don't always talk about. We're ready for assessments. We're ready to count the buckets. We are ready to count our answer sheets if you're still doing paper and pencil and you're ready to do the computer-based training. We're ready to count calculators. We're ready to count scrap paper. Are we designing what life after assessments is going to look like? Have we considered that that might be an opportunity to do something important? It will give you the opportunity to, number one, go back at some earlier district assessments and get a sense of whether your students have actually mastered something. Do they know? And then also give you the opportunity to begin prepping them for the coming year. Open them up, open the access, expose them to the next year's standards in the time remaining for this year. We want to do that. That's really important to consider. But here's what we want to do. We want to give you our power moves because we do power moves every week. So let's take a look at our power moves. We're going to do one power move this week and really kind of dig into what it might look like. And then we'll give you some other ones to consider. Oh, wait, let me stop for a second. Have you hit the subscription button? Have you subscribed to our show? Hit the subscribe, like, and share. Remember, please share this link to people to get us to our 200 by our second birthday. All right. So what we want to do for our power move this week is to protect access to rigorous learning. You're in assessment mode. You can't change that, but you're going to have life after the assessments. And I promise you, if you do not design life after the assessments, everything you worked for in your learning environment is going to go away. You're going to experience higher referrals. You're going to have more students doing what they should not be doing, being where they should not be. And it's going to create a toxic learning environment. So take the time now to think through very critically what life after the assessments are going to look like. And the number one thing you can do right now is to protect access to rigorous learning. What does that look like? Number one thing, maintain grade level tasks, adding scaffolds, not replacements. So this is a great time. You have a wider window. You may not be as constrained to curriculum as you may have been earlier in the year. This is an opportunity to really get to the grade level standards, get a sense of how do we move more students to mastery before the end of the year. Next thing, leaders, monitor assignments for thinking demand, not just completion. Do you as a leader know what the thinking demands are and what they look like? That's something to consider. Pay close attention to that. I know we have PLCs all over the place. In your PLCs, have those conversations around what kind of thinking is necessary as we continue with learning. Last week, our power move was this: protect learning. And we're taking this one a step further by protecting the access to rigorous learning. That's really critical. And then interventions happen within the core learning, not in place of the core learning. That's important. What does it mean to intervene so that students continue their learning and they continue to learn at a high level? So what's the impact of this? Number one, students will continue to build confidence as capable thinkers, not just test takers. And access to rigorous learning remains consistent across student groups. If over the next few weeks, you don't take the time to really build a learning environment that protects rigorous learning, your students are going to end the year having had their learning constrained. And you will step inside the instructional power that you have to hold back this opportunity to advance learning. So over the next few weeks, really take the time to consider what your learning environment could look like after assessments. And I'll tell you the story. I was in the classroom many years ago, and we had come to the end of our assessment window. It was over. We were getting ready for reassessments because we had to have some kids retake things. And I was still teaching. And my students came into my room. They had nothing. They had no pet. They had nothing associated with learning. I lost it. I was like, what are y'all in here? You got no learning. You got no nothing. They were so confused because in the other classrooms, they were not doing anything but sitting in their classrooms while their teachers broke down their classes, began to pack up and so clear out desks, pass out papers, and ask their students to help them get organized. Well, in my classroom, we were teaching, we were learning. I had my colleague come up to me and say, "Are you really still teaching?" And I was like, "Of course I'm still teaching. What else am I going to do?" And she said, "You're making us look bad." I was floored. Well, that's not necessarily an uncommon thing that happens. It was pretty common at the time, but that's not something you want your teachers to feel as my leaders out here. So, what are we going to do? Make sure you're protecting that rigorous learning so that your students are prepared for mastery and that they go into next year with the possibility of having some of their current or new learning already under their belt. So that's what we've got for today. Really want to thank you. Oh, actually, you know what? I have something else I wanted to share with you. Just some reminders. A reminder to avoid these mistakes. Number one, narrowing instruction under pressure. Don't do that. Lowering expectations in the name of support. Now, that's a hard one. That's a tough one to get past because we love our students to death and we love them straight into lower standards. So let's avoid that one. The next one is removing students from rigorous learning opportunities. Let's not do that. You've got time at the end of the year. Let's make it as rigorous and cognitively demanding as possible. Reducing test readiness to low-level practice instead of deep thinking. What that looks like is if you are in a place and this is April and maybe your assessments are coming up in May and you have an opportunity to do a school-wide prep test, step out of that prep test and allow students some very clear strategies and structures so that they can then reflect on their assessment taking skills from a skill set and a content piece. Let's try that. So you move beyond test taking to get them to think. I want you to move the question from are students ready to what students have access to rigorous thinking and who still doesn't. That is something that requires strategic observation because you have to know what rigorous thinking actually looks like when you see it. And it's not always the kid whose hand is up first. Sometimes it's the quiet kid. So again, I want to thank you for joining our episode tonight for Let's Talk Power Live. It is assessment season and there are mistakes that leaders make. But we have given you some strategies and some thinking around how to avoid those common mistakes. Next week, I want to invite you back. But in the meantime, like, subscribe, share, and leave me a comment. What are some other power conversations you would like me to touch on? Let me know because we're going to be building our shows for the fall. So let me know what are some other power conversations you'd like to have. All right. Thank you for joining me. Have a great rest of your weekend. And remember, power is real and instructional power is even more real.